Hi, I'm Brad Ross, an education advocate for the Global Mining Education Foundation. Recently, Donald Trump won his second election after losing the last one in 2020. There's a clear connection to education because Donald Trump ran on a platform of Make America Great Again. That really means that he had to activate a lot of people who believe that America is not great. One of the reasons for that is that they become disenfranchised. They're unable to be successful in our economy today because they don't have all the tools. A lot of that has to do with education. In fact, one of the biggest differences between this election and the last is that 62% of the people who do not have degrees voted for Donald Trump. In the last election, it was only 54%. That difference is large because 46% of the people in the United States do not have degrees. And he activated a lot of new voters in that category. This has had a tremendous impact on this election. And it's probably a lesson that we ought to think about. How do we give all people an opportunity to be successful and to be engaged in our economy? In the United States, we used to have different paths of success for people to get to the middle class, for instance. One of those is to have a degree, but we also had a significant manufacturing and mining part of our economy. That part has been severely diminished over the years, and having a degree in a service economy like we have now becomes even more important. But what the election shows is that our university system in the United States is failing to be able to service a large part of our population who need to be a part of our economy and be successful. One of the reasons why this is happening is that universities are an exclusive institution. They limit who can attend the university in large part by two criteria. The first criteria is that people have to pass an entrance exam. But the problem with this is that people from lower income in rural areas often do not have access to really great teachers or systems that can help support them prepare for those tests. And it's been proven that these entrance exams are not a good indicator of success when people get to the university. The best example of that is the GI Bill and the veterans that returned from World War II. The GI Bill afforded them a free education. Some of the universities, many of the larger, more prestigious ones, did not want the veterans because they didn't think they'd be prepared. They didn't think they had the background to be successful. What turned out is that the veterans were actually much more successful than the average student. And what that shows is that just because we think that people don't have the background to be successful in our education system doesn't make it true. And there's a lot of people from the lower income who, if they were able to get a college education, would be successful in that education as well as afterwards in their jobs beyond that. The second criteria that universities have is that people have to pay for it. And it's become very expensive. They either have to have the financial capability themselves, or they have to be able to achieve scholarships, often based upon the same criteria that's used for entrance into the university, or they have to go deep in debt, long-term debt that can take decades to pay. And just as there's been a loss of middle-class jobs from manufacturing and mining, the cost of education has skyrocketed. Today, after inflation, education in the United States is on average 3.5 times greater than when I went to the university. Most universities have a priority to maximize the amount of money that they return from each student instead of figuring out how to keep the costs low and teach as many students as possible. But it doesn't have to be that way. Today, you can send your kids to China and they could get a college education that's high quality for 10% of the cost of a college education in the United States. We also know that we can deliver a high quality professional development courses for a much lower cost than the universities today. One of the good examples is Microsoft. Microsoft has high quality professional development courses that are college quality, but their cost is about 3% of many university courses. The reality is that the cost of education should really be going down when you consider the technologies and the internet and communications, but instead it's continued to rise faster than inflation. That's a systemic issue. that needs to be resolved if we're going to provide skills training to millions of people who really need it. But it's not just the cost that's an issue for universities. Too often today, education is not as effective, efficient, or as credible as it should be. In many ways, college educations are ineffective. It takes 4 years to prepare a person to take on their first job. That's a long period of time for somebody to go without an income. Secondly, it's not combined with work experience. We know that if you combine work experience with formal education at the same time, you actually end up with a better product. The third thing is that all this education is front-loaded. And the fact of the matter is that knowledge and skills that you build diminish over time if you don't use them right away. A lot of that knowledge is already gone. The fourth thing is that a lot of the courses that you take at a university are not actually courses that you need for the position that you're training for. And so you've wasted time, you've wasted money taking classes that you may not use. And the fifth thing is, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, people who teach at the universities don't have practical experience. And if you don't have practical experience, how can you teach people to actually apply the knowledge that they're using? What we should have is people who are world experts being able to teach our students in the future. Second issue is that education in universities is actually very inefficient. They never reach the economies of scale to be efficient. Think about it on a teacher perspective. I was a college professor. If I was the best teacher in the world, the number of students that I would have is limited based upon the number of people that have been accepted by the university and then need to take my class. That means that I teach tens to maybe a couple hundred students any one semester. But with the current technology, you can reach tens of thousands of students, hundreds of thousands of students, and even millions. Why aren't the best teachers in the world able to reach millions of students instead of just a few hundreds at the most? The other inefficiency is from the institution standpoint. The institutions have a lot of bureaucracy and overhead. It's one of the reasons why the cost is so high. We need to find ways to reduce those overheads and bureaucracies so that more of the cost goes to teaching and not to people that are administrating. The third issue is credibility. Skills are based upon courses that the students take. And for those courses, each teacher sets their own syllabus, what that teacher wants to teach. And each teacher sets the criteria for passing. There's no standardization for individual courses. That means that some will be excellent, others will be not. And there's no way to tell based upon a grade that somebody gets whether they are capable in that skill area. And we can tell that because of something called grade inflation. Anymore, education has gotten so expensive that universities really don't feel that they can fail somebody. They've paid too much money for them to fail. So there's pressure on teachers to make sure that as many people as possible succeed in the class instead of trying to make sure that they have the skills that are needed. So we need to change the current system. We need to create new paths to build skills to become a professional if we're going to service millions and more people. But there's an underlying problem. There's no competition between universities. Once a student starts a program, they're committed to that program. And from that point on, the university is a monopoly. They can't take courses from other institutions or learn those skills someplace else and have it count towards their degree. That creates a lot of the ineffective, inefficient, and credibility issues that we have in our university systems. There's actually a fairly simple solution. If we were to pass a law that all universities would have to accept credits for any students who can pass the final test for a class, no matter how they acquired those skills, and that testing would have to be at a low cost, we could create more competition between universities. Because then any student could go to any university to get the training that they need, and they can select the best place to get individual skills instead of having to rely upon just the university that they're currently enrolled at. We also need to think about how we can create new paths for people to become skilled and be successful in our society. To do that, We need to think about providing training and certification through an industry-driven institute instead of just academic institutes. An industry-driven institute would have course content and certifications developed by industry professionals. We can take a small piece of time from a lot of industry professionals to do that work. And then that way they wouldn't have to work on it full time. But we would provide full-time coordinators and facilitators so that they can be effective and efficient as they're building those courses. And at the end of the day, they certify specific skills instead of entire degrees. By looking at the skill level instead of the degree level, we can make sure that whoever gets a certification, they actually meet the requirements that they say is on that certification. It will help lower the cost because people don't have to take 4 years to build up specific skills that they need for a job. It's going to be much more effective because a lot of the training will be done by industry professionals. It's going to be efficient because you can offer that to anybody at a low cost. And finally, it will be credible. If the industry is responsible for the credentials, they'll accept those credentials, and that's more credible than just a degree. So what the goal should be is to make education what it really should be. High quality skills training at as low as cost as possible to help as many people who want to put the time in to become more successful with greater skills. That will not only help them be successful, it will help our companies be successful. It'll help our country be more successful. It will even help our entire society be more successful. The election in the United States demonstrated some basic problems in our educational system. It's time for us to create a strategy and put the resources to change that system to benefit all of us.